What happens aback? One of Hollywood's best admired actors sits bottomward for what should be a accepted annual a loan to acquisition. Himself adverse a host bent to breach him bottomward on a live television. What you're about to attest in is the moment Denzel Washington accomplished his breaking point. And assurance me, you've never apparent annihilation like this before. Accomplish, abiding to hit that subscribe button, and beat a animate version beneath, because this adventure will leave you analytic, aggregate you anticipation. You knew about daytime television. The flat lights were afire hot that Tuesday morning, as Denzel Washington absolved to simulate the appearance set, his accepted composed abode intact. He'd done hundreds of interviews over his decades-connected career, but article acquainted altered about this one. The activity in the allowance was electric, about adverse as he acclimatized into the bedfellow armchair above from the console of hosts. Joy Behar leaned advanced in her seat, a bloodthirsty smile, arena above her aperture as she confused through her notes. She'd been cat-and-mouse for this moment, planning her advance for weeks. The added co-hosts seemed almighty quiet, about as if they sensed what was coming. Denzel, acceptable to the view, Joy began, her articulation decrepit with a sweetness. I accept to say, it's absorbing timing for you to be actuality announcement, your new film. Abnormally accustomed some of the, shall we say, ambiguous choices you've fabricated recently. Denzel's eyebrows channeled slightly, but his articulation remained steady. Acceptable morning, Joy. I'm not abiding, I chase what you beggarly by ambiguous choices. Could you be added specific? Joy's smile widened, and she leaned back in her armchair like a cat dabbling with its prey. Well, it's allocution about your contempo comments, apropos acceptance, and ancestors' values. Some bodies are adage, you're out of draft with avant-garde America. That your angle are, how should I put this, cautiously antiquated. The restriction in the flat was palpable. Camera operators exchanged glances, and the admirers sat in abashed silence. This wasn't the archetypal celebrity annual they'd appear to apprehend from the view. Denzel's jaw anchored about imperceptibly, but his articulation remained controlled. I've consistently been accessible about my acceptance and my acceptance. Enable ancestors' values. I don't see how that makes me out of touch. If anything, I anticipate those ethics are added important now than ever. But don't you think, Joy interrupted, her articulation assent slightly, that your Belvedere gives you a albatross to advance with the times? I mean, some of your statements could be apparent as judgmental, alike, adverse to assertive communities. The added hosts confused uncomfortably in their seats. This was assent faster than anyone had anticipated. Denzel's publicist, watching from the wings, looked accessible to intervene. But Denzel captivated up an attenuate Duke gesture, signaling her to breach back. Joy, I anticipate there's a axiological confounding here. Denzel replied, his accent still measured, but with an bend, bit by bit in. Having acceptance and assertive and acceptable ethics doesn't accomplish addition judgmental or harmful. At agency, I accept attempt that advisor my activity and my work. Joy scoffed, absolutely. Scoffed appropriate there on a live television. Principles, is that what we're calling it? Because from area I sit, it looks added like your application, your celebrity cachet, to advance in a hand calendar that bluntly belongs in the accomplished century. The admirers began to murmur. Some admirers at home were already extensive for their phone's analysis. That article aberrant was unfolding. Denzel's hands, which had been comatose calmly on the arm of his chair, now absorbed the bolt slightly. An agenda. Denzel's articulation agitated an agenda of disbelief. Joy, I came actuality today to allocution about my film, about the ability of acting, about the belief we acquaint, and why they matter. I didn't appear actuality to be ambushed or to accept my appearance assassinated on a live television. Oh, please, Joy coiled her Duke dismissively. Nobody's abolition your character. I'm artlessly allurement you to annual, for the impulse of your words. Aback you allocution about acceptance and ancestors the way you do. You're about cogent millions of Americans that their lifestyles are wrong. Denzel leaned advanced in his chair, his accord alpha to crack. That's not what I'm adage at all, and you apperceive it. You're ag my words, putting meanings into them that were never there. Am I? Joy's articulation took on a biting tone, because I accept quotes here. Denzel, absolute quotes from interviews. Area, you fabricated some appealing, bright statements about how bodies should alive their lives. She captivated up at assemblage of papers, bouncing them dramatically. The camera zoomed in, communicable, every micro-announcement on Denzel's face as he accomplished this wasn't aloof an ad-lib attack. This was a perfected assault. Those quotes, Denzel said slowly, his articulation bottomward to an alarming quiet, were taken from a chat about my claimed journey, about how acceptance has guided me through difficult times in my life. They were never meant as judgments on how others should live, but that's how they appear across. Joy apprenticed on relentlessly, and a back edition with your access speaks that way. It has consequences. Absolute after effects for absolute people. The flat acquainted like a burden cooker accessible to explode. Denzel's eyes flashed with article the admirers had never apparent before. A glimpse of the man abaft, the anxiously crafted accessible persona. Joy, he said, his articulation now accustomed to admonishing tone. I've spent my absolute career aggravating to a quaint belief that matter, that affect people, that accompany out the best in humanity. I've never already acclimated my belvedere to breach bodies bottomward or to accomplish them feel beneath. Then, can you say the same? The catechism afraid in the air, like a challenge. Joy's smile faltered for aloof a moment, but she bound recovered. Her advance acceptable alike, added vicious. Don't you cartel about face this about on me, she snapped. I'm not the one who needs to acknowledgement for anachronous thinking. I'm not the one whose comments accept aching people. Aching people. Denzel's articulation rose for the aboriginal time. 18-carat, acrimony alpha, to breach through his able facade. The alone actuality I see affliction bodies appropriate now is sitting above from me. Application her belvedere to advance. A bedfellow who came, actuality, in acceptable faith. The admirers was absolutely bashful now. Watching an allure and abhorrence as one of their best admired actors faced off adjoin one of daytime television's best arguable hosts. The added co-hosts looked like they capital to abandon into their chairs. Joy leaned advanced aggressively. Acceptable faith, you alarm advancing on this appearance and abounding your bigoted angle. Acceptable faith, you alarm abnegation to exceed the abuse your words account. Acceptable faith. Denzel stood up slowly, his abounding acme in attendance bushing the screen. The cameras captured every inch of his 6-foot anatomy as he looked bottomward at Joy, with an announcement that could accept broiled steel. Narrow-minded, his articulation was quiet again, but it agitated the weight of decades of experience, of struggle, of triumph. Lady, you don't apperceive the aboriginal affair about my apperception or my heart. You've spent the aftermost 10 account aggravating to breach bottomward a man you've never met based on words you've alleged to misinterpret. The action was extensive, a baking point, and anybody in the flat could feel it. This was no best aloof, a altercation amid a host and a guest. This was article abundant, added fundamental. A affray, amid to absolutely altered worldviews, arena out in absolute time for millions to see. Joy wasn't abetment down. If anything, seeing Denzel angle up seemed to armament her blaze alike more. She leaned back in her armchair with a beam that screamed arrogance. Acutely adequate, the ability she captivated in this moment. Oh, so now your activity to alarm me, Joy said with a beam that articulate added like a cackle. Typical, a backman like you can't handle actuality questioned. You resort to concrete intimidation. The allegation hit the flat like a lightning bolt. Gasps could be heard from the audience, and the added co-hosts looked absolutely mortified. Denzel's eyes widened in atheism at what he aloof heard. Concrete intimidation. Denzel's articulation agitated an accent of complete shock. Joy, I stood up because I accept account for myself and for this conversation. Article that acutely is an actuality alternate here. But if you appetite to aberration that into article threatening, that says aggregate about you and annihilation. About me does it. Joy attempt back, her articulation decrepit with condescension. Because from area I'm sitting, it looks like you can't handle a able woman allurement. You boxy questions. Is that what they accomplished you in all those Abbey casework you adulation to allocution about? The bargain attempt at his acceptance was the atom that lit the fuse. Denzel's absolute abode, confused, and for the aboriginal time in the interview. His allegorical accord, absolutely cracked. Stop, he said sharply, his articulation acid through the flat like a blade. Just stop, appropriate there. You appetite to advance my views. Fine. You appetite to disagree with my perspective. Go ahead. But you will not sit there and apish my faith. And you will not aberration my continuing up into some affectionate of threat. Joy's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. She'd gotten the acknowledgement she wanted, and she was activity in for the kill. I'm not a G, anything. I'm artlessly pointing out the pattern. You can't handle criticism, so you get aggressive. You can't handle avant-garde thinking, so you adumbrate abaft anachronous beliefs. Anachronous beliefs. Denzel's articulation rose again. And this time, there was no absolute. The emotion, you anticipate acceptance is outdated. You anticipate assertive an article bigger than yourself is outdated. Lady, let me acquaint you. What's outdated? What's anachronous is application. Your belvedere to breach bodies bottomward instead of architecture them up. The action was embageous above annihilation anyone had expected. The show's ambassador was aimlessly gesturing from abaft the cameras. But Cypher seemed to apperceive how to stop what was happening. Joy wasn't finished. Oh, amuse additional me, the abode about architecture bodies up. You've fabricated a career. Out of arena, the aforementioned characters over and over. The blue-blooded man, the moral authority, but a back absolute activity calls for you to appearance some growth, some evolution. You abatement aback on the aforementioned annoyed talking points. That was it. That was the moment Denzel Washington, absolutely absent on The View. His face adapted into article the admirers had never apparent before, an admixture of angelic animus and about controlled fury. You appetite to allocution about my career. His articulation was now booming through the studio. You appetite to catechism my work. I've spent 40 years in this business, aggravating to acquaint, belief that matter, aggravating to portray characters with abode and strength. I've played kings and slaves, soldiers and fathers, heroes and burstmen. And every distinct role I've taken has been about award the altruism in people, about assuming their struggles and their triumphs. Joy approved to interrupt, but Denzel wasn't accepting it. For the aboriginal time in the absolute interview, he absolutely took control. No, you've had your about face to talk. Now it's mine, he said, his duke acid through the air. You sit actuality every day on this appearance, and what do? You breach bodies down, you mock, you ridicule, you attack, you booty animal beings with absolute struggles and absolute behavior, and you abate them to punchlines for your audience's entertainment. The flat was asleep bashful except for the complete of Denzel's articulation, alveolate off the walls. Alike, the camera abetter seemed frozen. Borderline whether to accumulate filming this aberrant breakdown of a daytime allocution show. And you, accept the audacity, Denzel continued, his articulation growing stronger with anniversary word, to sit there and abode me about advance and evolution. You've been accomplishing the aforementioned act for decades. The aforementioned bitter, contemptuous, accepted that treats every bedfellow like their actuality for your claimed amusement. Joy's face had gone pale, but her adamant band wouldn't let her back down. I'm not bitter, I'm honest. I ask the questions that matter. The questions that ascendancy bodies accountable. Accountable. Denzel laughed, but it wasn't an affable sound. Answerable to who? To you, who fabricated you, the moral ascendancy on how bodies should anticipate and believe. Who gave you the appropriate to sit in acumen of anybody who walks through that door? The added co-hosts were attractive aback and, alternating amid them like assemblage at a tennis match, absolutely abandoned to arbitrate in what had become a all-encompassing exact warfare. I accept the right, Joy said, her articulation afraid hardly now, because I accept a platform, and I use it to allege accuracy to power. Accuracy to power. Denzel's articulation absurd with disbelief. Joy, you are the power. You accept a civic television show. Millions of viewers, accumulated backing. You're not some crusading announcer speaking accuracy to power. You're the enactment advancing anyone who doesn't anticipate absolutely like you do. The allegation hit home, and Joy's accord assuredly began to slip. That's not true. I action for the underdog. I action for bodies who don't accept a voice. Do you? Denzel challenged. Dispatch afterpiece to the panel. Because from area I'm standing, it looks like you action for ratings. You actualize altercation because altercation sells. You advance bodies like me because you apperceive it'll get bodies talking, get bodies watching. Joy's aperture opened and bankrupt like an angle out of water. For the aboriginal time in the absolute confrontation, she seemed to be at a accident for words. And the absolutely sad part, Denzel continued, his articulation now bottomward to an added communicative tone. But accident, none of its intensity, is that you apparently started this career absent to do article meaningful. You apparently had dreams of authoritative indifference, of application television to accompany bodies together, to educate, to inspire. The ascertainment was so accidentally claimed and astute that it seemed to hit Joy like a concrete blow. Her anxiously complete armor of acrimony and assailment began to crack. But about fourth the way, Denzel went on. You absentively that disturbing. Bodies bottomward was easier than architecture them up. You absentively that action was added assisting than conversation. And now actuality, you are application, your position to embuscade guests who appear actuality in acceptable faith. Joy approved, to assemblage to acquisition some comeback. But the action seemed to accept gone out of her. I'm accomplishing my job, she said weakly. Is this your job? Denzel asked, his articulation now about gentle, but still accustomed, amazing weight. Is advancing people's acceptance your job? Is edgy their words your job? Is creating analysis and abhorrence your job? The questions of freight in the air, like accusations and Joy, had no answers. The woman who consistently had article to say, who never backed bottomward from a fight, sat there in abashed silence. Because if that's your job, Denzel said, then maybe it's time to acquisition a new band of work. The blackout that followed Denzel's aftermost words was deafening. Joy sat there, her aperture hardly opened, staring at him with a bad mixture of shock and article that ability accept bin recognition. For a moment, it seemed like the absolute flat had abandoned how to breathe. But Joy Behar hadn't survived decades. In television by abetment bottomward from a fight, alike aback she was acutely losing. Her accretion was swift, and aback she battened again. Her articulation agitated an atrocious bend that appear aloof. How ashamed she absolutely was. How cartel you, she said, her articulation abashed with the aggregate of acerbity and humiliation. How cartel you appear into my abode and acquaint me how to do my job. You're an actor, Denzel. You pretend to be added bodies for a living. What gives you the appropriate to abode me about accuracy and honesty? Denzel looked at her with article that ability, except in pity. Joy, this isn't your house. This is a television flat area. Guests are declared to be advised with basal account and dignity. And you're right, I am an actor. But actuality, an amateur has accomplished me article that you assume to accept forgotten. Oh, acquaint me. Joy spat, acrimony decrepit from every word. It's accomplished me how to listen, Denzel replied, calmly. Every role I've any time played appropriate me to accept that character's motivations, their fears, their hopes, their pain. I had to acquisition the altruism in them. I liked the ones I disagreed with. But you don't listen. You delay for your about face to attack. Joy's face ablaze red. I accept plenty. I accept to the affliction your attenuated angle account. Absolute bodies in the absolute world. No, Denzel said firmly, afraid his head. You accept for ammunition. You accept for means to aberration. What bodies say into article, you can use adjoin them. There's aberration amid audition, someone's words, and compassionate their heart. The added co-hosts were about airy at this point, apprenticed to back into their chairs as if they could abandon entirely. The admirers was absolutely captivated. Witnessing article that acquainted added like a masterclass in animal attitude than a daytime television interview. Joy approved a altered tactic. Her articulation acceptable, added acute and desperate. You anticipate you're so wise, so enlightened, but your aloof edition celebrity who thinks his acclaim gives him the appropriate to deliver to the blow of us. I'm not admonition to anyone, Denzel said, his articulation abiding and controlled again. I aggregate my claimed behavior in added interviews because I was asked about them. I never affected them on anyone. Never said others had to alive the way I lived, but you've spent the aftermost 20 account aggravating to force your behavior on me, aggravating to accomplish me apologize for who I am. That's not what I'm doing, Joy protested, but her articulation lacked conviction. Isn't it? Denzel challenged. You brought me actuality, beneath pretenses. You told my bodies this would be a chat about my new film, about my career. Instead, you ambushed me with a political advance, advised to accomplish me attending bad, and accomplished you attending like some affectionate of crusader for justice. Joy's jaw dropped. I did not embuscade you. I asked accepted questions. Legitimate. Denzel's eyebrows attempt up. Joy, you accused me of concrete browbeating for continuing up. You mocked my faith. You appropriate I was adverse to absolute communities. You alleged my life's assignment anachronous and irrelevant. If that's your abstraction of accepted journalism, afresh the profession is in worse appearance than I thought. The cameras captured every micro-announcement on Joy's face as the weight of her behavior throughout the annual began to bore in. She looked about the flat as if seeing it for the aboriginal time. Conceivably acumen how her accomplishments appeared to the millions watching at home. I was accomplishing my job, she said again, but this time, it articulate added like she was aggravating to argue herself than anyone else. Your job, Denzel said slowly, should be to acquaint and appoint your audience, not to embuscade your guests and actualize accidental conflict. Your job should be to analyze altered perspectives, not to advance anyone who doesn't allotment your worldview. Joy's accord was absolutely burst. Now, you don't accept the pressures of this business. The expectations, don't I? Denzel asked, and for the aboriginal time, his articulation agitated a agenda of 18-karat sadness. Joy, I've been in the ball business for 4 decades. I accept pressure, I accept expectations. I accept what it's like, a back admiral and producers advance you to be article. You're not adequate being. The acceptance seemed to bolt Joy off guard. She looked at him with a bashing, as if she'd abandoned, that beneath the cine brilliant, exoteric, was a animal actuality who had faced his own struggles and challenges. But here's what I abstruse, a connected time ago. Denzel continued, you can't let the business change who you are at your core. You can't let ratings and altercation become added important than basal animal decency. Because aback, you do that, you lose yourself. Joy's eyes, abounding with tears, admitting whether they were tears of frustration, anger, or article added was absurd to tell. You anticipate, I've absent myself. I think, Denzel said gently, that about fourth the way, you forgot that the bodies you annual are animal beings, with feelings, with families, with their own struggles and triumphs. You started seeing them as agreeable instead of people. The barbarous bluntness of the account afraid in the air amid them. Joy looked bottomward at her addendum at the assemblage of affidavit she'd acclimated to advance him earlier, and for a moment, it seemed like she ability absolutely breached bottomward on a live television. This annual was declared to be about your movie, she said quietly, about to herself. It still can be, Denzel replied, extending what acquainted like an olive branch. We can alpha over. We can accept a basilute chat instead of a battle. Joy looked up at him. and for aloof a moment, the affectation slipped completely. The admirers could see accomplished the confrontational host to the actuality underneath. Addition, who maybe had gotten absent in the following of ratings and relevance. But the moment didn't last. Joy's walls went to backup, her defenses reassembled themselves, and she befuddled her head. No, I anticipate we've said enough. Denzel nodded slowly, compassionate that the befalling for accretion had passed. Yes, I anticipate we have. He angry to face the cameras directly, speaking accomplished joy to abode the admirers that had witnessed this aberrant confrontation. I appetite to acknowledge anybody who acquainted in today. I achievement that what you've apparent actuality reminds you that we're all animal beings, that we all accept article to offer, and that we should amusement anniversary added with respect. Alike aback, we disagree. With that, he absolved off the set, abrogation Joy sitting there in abashed silence. The weight of what had aloof transpired, clearing over the flat like abundant blanket. The cameras kept rolling for a few added seconds, capturing Joy's face. As she struggled to action, what had aloof happened to for assuredly acid to commercial. But for the millions who had watched this atomic encounter, the images and words would amble connected afterwards. The television was angry off. This wasn't aloof, a celebrity annual gone wrong. This was a moment of truth, a glimpse abaft the blind, of daytime television, and of admonition that sometimes the best able moments appear aback bodies. Stop assuming an alpha actuality real. What did you anticipate of this absurd confrontation? Did Denzel go too far, or was Joy absolutely out of line? Beat your thoughts in the comments beneath and accomplish abiding to subscribe for added, astonishing celebrity moments that you won't see anywhere.